Hi, I'm Dan Scanlon, a story artist for the movie Cars, and this is the production commentary featuring fellow members of the story, art, animation, and technical departments.
I'm Steve Purcell. I was a story artist on Cars.
I'm Bobby Podesta, directing animator.
And I'm Jim Murphy, directing animator.
I'm Scott Clark, supervising animator.
I am Doug Sweetland, also a supervising animator.
I'm Bob Hawley, production designer.
I'm Bill Cohn. I'm the other production designer.
And I'm Tia Cratter. I'm the shading art director.
I'm Jean-Claude Kalash. I'm the director of photography.
My name is Edmund Ostby, and I'm the supervising technical director.
I'm Tim Milliron. I'm the characters supervisor.
And I am Sophie Vincelet. I am the Cars set supervisor.
This commentary is designed to give you an insight into Pixar's philosophies and processes that took Cars on its 4-year journey from initial concept to fully realized motion picture.
I think it was 4 years for me, and we just watched it the other day for the first time, and in that time, I think kids have gone through high school or college.
Yeah, your audience wasn't really born yet.
Yeah.
This sequence here is wonderful because it starts the movie off by showing you just how gorgeous Lightning McQueen is, and all the shading work and paint work that went into that just comes alive.
I was born in the top. Sometimes I have a big. The first shot in the film was actually the very, very first shot we filmed in crowds, I remember as well, which was, a huge thing because we didn't know that we'd be able to render them all. We didn't know if we'd be able to animate them all.
And the sequence sets up right from the get-go, you're in a car world and the way they look. We had to figure out the rules of how these guys, move like real cars and how they move like a cartoon. And I think right there, when he does that, it's an example of the personality in the car.
Just so you know, when we're animating, we don't see any of the camera flashes. We have to actually kind of animate camera flashes kind of ourselves. But it is things like tire marks on the track aren't there. Crowds usually are empty.
All the lights and the shadows don't exist. The reflections on the cars don't exist. They look like little plasticine cartoon models.
When McQueen's going through the crowd, he's like the best. He's better than anyone else out there. He's an athlete at the top of his game. Really just a dominant, athlete, kind of surfing more than just driving.
One of the things we found was a fun way, like this scene kind of shows some of the stuff that's going on in the stands, and we were finding out a good way to introduce this world, which is kind of an alien concept of a world that's all cars with no drivers, is to kind of show a little bit of what the fans are like. And some of the research we did was they sent us to a Raiders football game, and we were, tailgating in the parking lot and seeing how the fans behave and kind of getting the moments that people would relate to right off, so that the way that you're introduced to this world is with things that you kind of recognize from your own experience.
We did spend over 6 months setting up the lighting for the sequence. And the reason was John wanted a pretty realistic look to the whole sequence. We had a lot of references. One of the famous races we used was the Bristol race. And the biggest thing was, for John, was the highlights and how they danced on the cars and the shadows and how they moved. And it really replicates a true racetrack.
The excitement you get from just seeing those multiple shadows whip by the cars as they move is really visceral, and it's a really important thing in the look. These are funny.
I remember John talking a lot about these, how this is sort of like pushed to the absolute extreme of absurdity.
Hokiness.
Right, that you can't even see the action on screen anymore. You can't even see the race anymore because there's all of these picture-in-picture craziness things that are going on top, which is like what Fox Sports does all the time.
Like this shot, we did a lot of lighting on McQueen, not knowing there's going to be 3 shots on his face.
And then the effects of the exploding piston cup in that last one is supposed to, be over the top of what broadcast graphics can be in this kind of race as well.
This is a really challenging sequence for us, and where it comes in the film is very challenging because we really wanted to open up with the believability of this world and the density of this world, so that, you had, if you've ever been to a NASCAR race, there's a feeling of how many people are in the crowds and how many people are in the infields, and the way that the cars drive against each other and knock into each other. And in the crashes where we actually had NASCAR guys like Darrell Waltrip and Jerry Nadeau came and talked to us about all the aspects of driving.
I think it would have been really easy to just have these cars sliding around and not look like they were physically real. But this crash is a really good example of getting believable physics and, really doing the homework, but also adding cartoony stuff like these two guys, the gags.
Animation, it's about caricature in life and stuff. And even if you look at the crash, it's a caricature of a crash. It's in some ways worse than a real crash of cars flying at the camera and wheels going by and everything. And then McQueen, zipping through and doing things.
And that's really caricature.
It's really caricature, but it's that whole thing where you believe it. It's not that we're shooting for reality, so to speak, but you're shooting to create a world and create stuff that's believable.
McQueen made it through. And a spectacular move by Lightning McQueen. Yeah, good job.
When we were working on shading these characters, we realized about halfway through that, they retain this scratching and dirt and scraping because of this race you see here in this crash. Are there any cars that didn't get beat up?
I think the Apple car did not crash because apples don't crash.
And there's one car that has a vinyl top instead of a hard top, and that is...
Vinyl toupee.
It is sort of lavender colored, if you can see it in there with a black top.
It's like the a pliable liquid toupee. What was it called? She'll never notice.
Yeah, vinyl spray in a can.
That's right. Vinyl topic.
Very clever. And so somebody had to go in and take all of these teams and paint 3 phases of deterioration. It's beautiful detail, which you got to look pretty carefully for. That's when that good freeze frame stuff comes in handy.
And you don't recognize it right away, detail-wise, but you do feel it. If it wasn't there, it would look wrong. And it was such a blast to do all the different race teams because I remember early on, John, we were kind of doing kind of self-referential little decals on the side of McQueen. And he said, no, we got to push it and really think about mock teams and products. And so we did a lot of research, and it was a blast coming up with all the different teams like RPM for nighttime backfire relief and Gasprin for hood-aches, and then what was it, Leakless, the adult drip pan. And there's a lot of secrets, like there's only 19 pits, but it looks like a lot. That's what matters.
1 lap to go, and Lightning McQueen has a huge lead. Oh, he's got it in the bag. Call in the dogs, put out the fire. We're going to ground us a new...
And Garrett Sheldrew ended up storyboarding a lot of the race, and he's kind of a savant. He has a moving camera inside of his head, so he can stare at his pad of paper and somehow move the camera, a few degrees at a time and track the entire race. And the race actually looks quite a bit like the way he boarded it.
Hey, Tim, how many cars did we have in the crowds?
In this race, I think we ended up with about 70,000. In the final race, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 120,000, it's a much, much bigger track. But this was sort of like Bristol, intended to be this very niche track. And this was actually a much, much harder track to lay out because there were all these different places that you had to put all of these crowds. And we had a special model that we used that would position a whole section of stands. But even so, there were, dozens and dozens of little sections that we had to dress in.
It's too close to call.
I think hopefully they can tell we like all the details and all the racing, because this was a blast to do the research for it.
One thing I love about this finish, and it always gets a laugh, is that tongue of McQueen's coming out. And I can tell you that whenever we're in art reviews with John, and he gets a pencil in his hand to, sort of help flesh out some details, he's always got his tongue sticking out. And I always felt like that was a little bit of John going into McQueen. Yeah, every once in a while you'll see throughout the film McQueen's got his tongue sticking out when he's really concentrating, just like John does.
I just wonder, is the tongue patent leather? Is it kind of tuck and roll? Is it button tuck?
I can tell you that we spent some time debating whether the inside of characters' mouths matched their paint color or if they were sort of human-like or were they wet or dry? This does not go without thinking about.
That's right. And so all the details like the teeth. What are teeth on cars? Do they have individual little chiclets? I think we tried some things like that. It looked really gross. Are they mechanical? Are they metal? And I think much like Bug's Life, they just turned to more bands, and it's just so they read, and so they feel like there's a mouth.
One of the great set of characters, I think, in the film are these pitties that are, especially chicks pitties, with their sort of fake chick mustaches that are just bolted on, that don't actually move with their mouths at all. It was one of the sort of cheesy accidents that happened during the course of the film. It was getting late in the film. We didn't have a lot of time left, and John wanted the pitties to have these chick mustaches because it was an idea that came up in the story. And so we were like, well, okay, John, but I don't know that we can make them move with the mouths. And he's like, that's great. That's perfect, because that way they'll just look totally bolted on, as if they're just, wearing these little gizmos that they're trying to be exactly like Chick, but they're really cheesy. I always thought those guys were really cool. The headdress was one of these things that showed up at first in one shot. There was one Dynaco girl with one headdress, and then, of course, as we built it, and John thought they were really ridiculous looking and cool looking, so we ended up with them all over the place.
You're a winner to me, you old daddy rabbit.
What I love about this movie is there's an element of realism that is very present in every shot, but then you see the characters' faces, you realize, okay, it is a cartoon after all. But there are many shots where, you're looking inside of the characters or behind, and they have beautiful element of realism.
Hey, buddy.
Well, the faces actually are quite rubbery, but it works if you treat the materials correctly in the rest of the car.
Yeah, they're getting an extraordinary amount of expressive acting out of the whole car, the posture, the pose.
An early issue with a concern early on was like, are we going to be able to act with these guys? How is this going to work? With Incredibles, arms and legs, a lot of room to act, and you've got cars that have, much like Nemo, but they don't even have fins. But I think it's pretty amazing how much personality they get on it. This is Lightning Storm. This is pretty funny. This is a whole mini movie.
Yeah, I would say that this is one of these 3 sequences where McQueen is either daydreaming, having a nightmare, or fantasizing, or worth seeing over and over again. You'll see that they are all very close in template to each other, but they have these subtle differences, and they're very funny. Even the sound effects are funny. It's a really great little compact sequence.
And so much work and time and energy went into that.
In the dream sequence, there's a shot with the Chinese theater in the background, and Ayrton Dietz did the lighting on that shot, and we were trying to find references, so we went online. And one thing we found interesting is there's always that window at the top of that building, and it was always lit. So we thought, oh, cool, we'll add a light. And the first thing John says, why is the light on in that window? And we brought up the images. He's like, cool, leave it on.
That was one thing that was really neat. John was always into the reference. So if you found something that was real, then he was totally happy to adapt it and to use it in the film. He was very, very much about making sure that this was a believable world.
Particularly when it comes to racing, the NASCAR world, and in general, the world of stock car racing. There's arcane stuff that anybody who knows about it knows, and we had to get it right so that the cars would be believable.
Congrats on the tie! I don't want to talk about it. Come on, let's go, Max. Saddle up. What'd you do with my trailer? I parked it over your sponsor's tent. What? You gotta make your personal appearance. No. Yes.
This commercial was kind of a late idea. We had shown the movie to some people, and a lot of the younger kids kind of had trouble with the idea of a sponsorship and what does it mean to be sponsored by someone. And we kind of thought the clearest way to illustrate it was a commercial. And we felt that kids understood that, Michael Jordan or whomever does shoe commercials and is sponsored by that. So we just tried to design the cheesiest low budget commercial we could for the worst product you could ever have to be sponsored by.
John wanted all the guys that were at this Rust-eze convention to be like Star Trek, really nerdy, like totally geeking out.
Like William Shatner just walked in the room and it's their hero. All the rust falling off of them, all those details, like that's what John's really, gets really well. Like the immersiveness of the world, like you really believe that all those cars are from Boston or the East Coast or something. They've gone through winters. They've got all this rust from the water and stuff underneath them.
Yeah. The two car talk guys, Tom and Ray Magliozzi, who play the part of the Rust-eze gentlemen, got to pick out their own car designs.
Yep, one's a Dodge Dart convertible, and John really wanted him to have he has these big bushy eyebrows in real life. So we frayed the top of the convertible top, and then had all these sort of bushy things that looked kind of like eyebrows.
Ka-chow. Mike Stocker was doing that ka-chow shot, that last one with McQueen. Ka-chow. And we kept taking out mouth shapes. Like, no, he's showing teeth. He's all ka-chow.
Yeah, he's a really forced fake.
Really forced, insincere.
Oh, yeah, don't drive like my brother.
Earlier on, McQueen had a very low-rent trailer, like we were saying, and over time it became more fun to kind of explore the idea of the pampered athlete and what kind of stuff he would have in his trailer. And he has the lighting under the shelves and all his knickknacks and his awards and the licensed products based on him.
This sequence is beautiful.
Yeah, this is kind of, it's the sort of sequence that in maybe in any other movie would kind of be glossed over, but there's some really subtle, great storytelling that I know a lot of people in the animation department got really jazzed about. It's not a strong character animation sequence necessarily, but you'll notice that, he's driving through the city in the beginning, and as he drives deep into the heart of the country, there's a lot of that interstate motif that ends up being talked about later. So, here you're on the surface enjoying Rascal Flatts and beautiful imagery, but there's images in this sequence that really resonate strongly with the theme of the movie.
And it's fun to watch this. We get kind of doing our work on pads of paper. You kind of get a very small sense of the scope of the world. So it's kind of fun to see as it goes through the process, the scope of how the entire world is realized.
One thing I like about the scene is that it really represents going from the big city, going out into the middle of nowhere, but also showing how the interstate just kind of bisects the land, and seeing the older roads winding with the land while there's just the interstate just cutting through mountains.
We're kind of sneaking in some forms in the sky also that are related to, it's kind of a precursor to the world that he's coming to.
Ooh, I knew this. Hello?
Things like the telephone was a big problem. Again, I don't really notice it as much now, but, figuring out what is that telephone going to be.
At one point, McQueen had a computer. Watching TV shows and switching around. It was less about watching his own race, which makes more sense to the story. And we had like different TV shows, like what a car soap opera would look like, or what car monster truck wrestling looks like. And
there was a car puppet show. It was really weird.
Like the car Sesame Street or whatever that might look like.
Yeah. Funny now how you can look back and see how all that stuff didn't make any sense.
It was also fun to use times of day that you could never really shoot in real life effectively, but in our medium we can do that. You could pick a very transient period of color and light and kind of hold it.
That guy with the mattress, we always had somebody there moving slowly, but when we saw that they had interpreted it as a guy with a mattress on his head, it was hilarious.
And then his blinker.
And then the blinker is
going the left blinker for the right exit.
Yeah, he didn't turn it off.
You'll see the minivan stop and the mattress slides off the top and smashes on the ground.
Why in the world would he have a mattress? What is a mattress even for?
I don't even want to know what they're going to do with the mattress.
Sure you can, Mac. Look, it'll be easy. I'll stay up with you. All night long.
Sometimes, man, John will just get his his laser vision locked in, and he'll just want to milk it.
That shot right there of Mac, Ron Zorman did
Waking
an
up.
amazing job of him trying to stay awake.
Yeah, great entertainment just in the animation.
The effects on these
So
imports are just amazingly cool. I particularly like the flames.
Yeah.
The flames and the lighting was fairly complex. Pretty much, John wanted to put light sources everywhere we could on the car. If I remember correctly, we'd have over 500 lights per car.
This shot right here, I think, is a cool example of how the movement style, how we caricatured the tight suspension and the way they would move, almost like remote control cars, like just very quick movement. And then the fourth guy, Snot Rod, is like an old 70s muscle car.
Yeah.
He's really heavy and
sloppy.
And he's sloppy, and he's always trying to he's trying to keep up with these guys. He's kind of the dorky guy that's always in the back.
These guys were really, really fun to build in the packet stage. John's whole idea was, of course, to take the import scene and just go to 11, go to 15, so that it was way, way, way past what anybody was doing, and completely ridiculous. The trouble is that it took us 4 years to make the movie, and these guys came along pretty early, and so as the import scene, we kept seeing bigger and bigger spoilers at all the import shows, and so as the film evolved, the spoilers on these guys just kept getting bigger and bigger. John would come back in a fix and be like, no, I saw a spoiler and I saw a tailpipe that was way bigger than what we've already got, so we need to go way further. So we ended up, these guys were much more toned down at the beginning of production, but by the end they ended up these completely ridiculous abominations.
I'm assuming that by the time the film actually comes out,
there'll be those cars.
Those cars will be on the road.
There's a shot coming up that Dave Smith did of McQueen waking up that's really cartoony that I always thought was as pushed as we could ever go right there.
Yeah.
It's like as far as you go in the non-car animal cartoony world, but then he skids out like a real car. I always like the contrast.
This sequence reminds me of when we locked the look of the trucks, and we were just about to start shot lighting, and John went on vacation or weekend. Do you guys remember?
Mm-hmm.
And he saw a truck stop one night, and he pulled over and called and started asking them to jot down notes of how they really look like. And we had to rejiggle things, and they're now accurate.
He wanted to make sure that we got the official way that those clearance lights and all are set up.
Yeah.
The train in the sequence that's coming up here was, he's really got a bit role, but when we started working on it, it was very important to me and to Bob Pauly, one of the art directors, that we really get the look of a train right. So we tried to base this after a stylized version of an old locomotive, and the freight cars are all, after some real kinds of freight cars that you could actually see out there.
And you gave us once that reference for the light. What's the name of that
That's
light?
called a Mars light.
The Mars light.
Does a figure eight pattern as the train drives down. It's so that the engineer does two things. One, it makes it so the engineer can see down into the ditches on both sides of the track, and it also makes the engine more visible to people outside.
The interstate.
We on characters, we built these systems that did a lot of suspension dynamics and a lot of tire bulging and so on. And Sheriff's sort of the canonical example. When he moves around, he bounces a lot. If he goes over a bump, he when he goes around a curve, he leans out a bunch. And so these were a bunch of effects that we gave the animators so that they could drive more reasonably without having to animate every last little thing.
I haven't gone this fast in years.
We tried to keep the pace up for the first half of the movie where McQueen's racing. Just, quick cuts, cameras moving a lot, and really high action. And then when we cut to Radiator Springs, just stagnant and completely the opposite, as sort of still as everything could be.
The bugs, of course, that buzz around the fluorescent lights are actually Volkswagen Beetle bugs. And they show up in a couple of other spots as well.
And the flowers there, that red waters, they're all modeled after taillights.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do we call them? We called them taillight.
Tailfin flowers.
Tailfin flowers. That's
And
right.
there's several different models of them,
Yeah.
and they all have those beautiful red reflectors
Yeah.
instead of petals.
How many lights did Flo's V8 end up having, JC?
Probably a couple of hundreds, with the neon towards the end.
I'm telling you, man, every third blink is slower.
So this sequence is really our first introduction to all of these characters, and John was very, very particular about making sure that while all of the characters are caricatured, these guys are very true to reality, and there was a lot of reference work done.
The collaborative nature of the work, once somebody does some little nuance that you see, it totally inspires the next guy. Like all this, the language just evolves just through the inspiration of each other.
I think a lot of the research we've been through Radiator Springs, it's like an amalgam of many towns we've been through on Route 66 and other places, these old highway towns, and we even measured some of them, right? About a half mile long, a lot of these towns are, and
Yeah, we drive up and down these main streets just to see how big a town felt like or was. And yeah, a half mile was a common length for sort of a main street in a town.
I have to point out before the sequence ends that this was one of the first sequences we did, and that this barbed wire was a pain.
Yikes.
Yeah. But it was...
Please enjoy
We
it.
redid it.
That was all hand animated. It was really well articulated, too. But again, this is mostly hand animated.
Bertie Sheepers did the wrecked road, where he actually took the model of the road that we had built and then ran a simulation of cracking and brittle fracture to make it turn into all these pieces. And it was driven by the path of the statue as it ran down the road.
Yeah, John wanted to make the statue look like he was surfing and have the
Or
sort
like
of
water
rubbles,
skier.
the little rocks that fly off just look like water.
So the color palette for the movie is very interesting. We wanted to start the movie, Act 1, the race, with very rich colors, NASCAR colors. And then when McQueen ended up lost in the town, we literally stripped all the colors out of the town, except for McQueen. We left his vivid color so that he doesn't fit in that environment. And towards the end of Act 2, when he starts to like the town and fall in love with Sally, McQueen builds on more dust on his body and he becomes one of them. And then the final race, we go back to the richer color palette.
Sponsor stated they have no idea where he is.
This shot of the Japanese reporter, we actually sticking all the white highlights on the eyes, so it's really is Japanese anime.
Lightning McQueen must be found at all costs.
We'd like to note our very own supervisor animator Scott Clark as the Hummer.
I did everything except for the lighting.
Oh, where am I? Morning, Sleeping Beauty!
John wanted a very washed out feel for the world when McQueen first wakes up in Radiator Springs, just to emphasize it.
And of course, the first thing he sees is this rusty old car, which he hates because he's a sponsor, if you just learned from Rusty's and all these gross old cars.
My name's Mater.
Mater and McQueen were two of the first characters that we had articulated, and one of the first challenges was how to figure out how to put a face in them, and I think each one of them has different challenges. McQueen's kind of got just like a slit mouth that you just stuck on the front of the bumper. He doesn't even have a bumper, and you just kind of tone down that. But Mater's someone that has like a bumper, and he's more complex looking, and he's got these big teeth, but we really had different challenges to make these faces work. One of them is you'll notice that the way that these shots are staged or composed is a lot of times they're 3/4, and the mouth ends up being kind of underneath the eyes and helps it read as a face more.
Just in terms of like thinking ahead about the level of detail of what you're going to see and what you can't see. And there's a shot right here of Mater, and he's just talking to McQueen. It's real simple. He's just coming in to say something, but he's rolling. And I think this was Ross Stevenson, and it was just, he kept him rolling just ever so slightly, which, knowing that later on, when you got these tires with treads and texture and everything else and the level of detail, when you see them in theater, it makes a big difference. So it doesn't feel like everything locks up and freezes. You want to kind of keep it alive and use it, in that case, to punctuate, the line and the delivery.
This is an interesting movie from a production standpoint, since it came right after Incredibles with some very articulate models, maybe the most articulate that I think we've ever had, where we really had shoulders to act with, everything that we as people have to act with. And now you go from there to this, where the head is the body with the face on it. And and
it's not really even a head, it's a heart.
Yeah, Nat McLaughlin did a great job on this. Also, there's some funny paintings back there. If you get a chance to see them, there's a few featuring Stanley, the founder of the town, but behind the judge, if you look at enough of the shots, you'll see that it's sort of about the creation of the universe, in a sense. You can see there's this big factory floating on the clouds where the cars are coming out, and Justice is a tow truck with the scales of justice hanging from the back.
You want to make the town feel old and worn, but they also have great respect for their place and take care of it. So you need to get a certain amount of age into it, but not to the point where it kind of looks ill-kept and ratty.
In a lot of the designs of these sets, there's always some reference to Car World. You see around the baseboard, or around the courthouse is this what do you call that? The guardrails.
And the fans are like belt fans, aren't they?
They're radiator fans.
Radiator fans.
Yeah.
And what else is there in here?
There's a thermometer
behind.
Oh yeah,
behind
the dock. There's a that window with the red thing on the bottom is actually adapted from a kind of thermometer that old cars used to have in the Model T era.
Right, and the lamps here are very much like street lamps, sort of modeled after street lamps.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, and then the posts, the pillars. I remember this too. The pillars are actually leaf springs. Leaf springs are a kind of suspension component that are these sort of laminated together pieces of steel that sort of, when you flex them, they bend together and they spring back, which characters like Luigi use for their suspension system. And so all the pillars are actually these turned sideways leaf springs. Cool.
Reflection was very expensive in the sequence. Typically in outdoor scenes, you can reflect the immediate objects like a building or a character, and then the rest of the world like mountains and skies, you can just use a flat card and reflect it. But because this environment was closed, we had to use true reflections.
Okay, boys, stay with me. One of the things that we were concerned about when we were designing Flo is those chrome lips. Chrome is basically a mirror surface. What would happen when she started talking? Would those lips start crawling around and be so distracting that we wouldn't be able to read her expression? And I think they found a wonderful balance in it.
Yeah, it was a controlling. It's kind of an emblem almost. A lot of the 50s cars have these great, huge chrome, but chrome grills and bumpers become a little bit too masculine, so we want to kind of simplify it. And the way it's animated, it's beautifully controlled. HUD was also another issue where all that chrome dancing around.
Right.
But I know when Jim and those guys were watching Paul Newman, he doesn't have a huge range of motion in his mouth. It's pretty reserved. So that actually helped control some of those chrome issues. And I think also it's not brand new chrome. It's a little bit of hazing, I think, on it. And that kind of softens it.
Bessie? Who's Bessie?
Bessie was a lot of fun. So Bessie was this crazy cross-departmental beast where there were obviously a lot of effects there with the tar and the fire and so on, but all the articulation we did in characters. We built her and made her move in characters and then handed her off to sets. And she was quite the challenge to get all of the shading right, because this is one of these areas where we're trying as hard as we can not to make her look like computer graphics, not to make this machine look like it's pristine in any way. It's dinged up. It's very, very dirty, and that was the big challenge, was to make her look, totally disgusting, which is sometimes a little bit hard in computer graphics.
Whoa, how long is this going to take? Well, the biggest concern on HUD was that big chrome bumper and getting enough articulation out of that bumper that you got enough expression and feeling, but not so much so that that chrome bumper actually felt fleshy. So in testing HUD, he started off pretty fleshy and pretty articulate in his lips and mouth. And man, it just seemed like every test, we just kept pulling it back and pulling it back and pulling it back.
Especially when you saw a render.
Which we didn't see a render for a long time. We were almost done. The model was finalized before we saw a chrome render.
This gives you a pretty good view of the world. You can see that the forms are really car-shaped. That's sort of the Cadillac Ranch back there, or the Cadillac Range, we call it. And then these cliffs are also sort of modeled after the hoods of cars, and they have hood ornaments. So this is Ornament Valley, so to speak, as opposed to Monument Valley.
There used to be a bridge leading to town.
Oh, right.
The bridge was destroyed, but if they got money to rebuild the bridge, then they thought maybe people would come back into town.
They let them go.
So then they figured if they had a race with the biggest, most popular race car in the world, they could maybe make some money to rebuild the bridge. This was a whole different direction that the movie went.
So we had this elaborate rally race. It was amazing and really fun to work on because we had characters coming from out of town. We had kind of good old boy racers from the next hill over. They'd come over and they'd smash into each other for fun, and they were all kind of painted up in their custom paint and dented fenders and stuff. And we had we had Jaguar gentleman racers coming. We had a monster truck in the town. We had like 1 million cars on the street, and we were going to do this race that would take us all around the Radiator Monument and through the mountains and over rivers and stuff. And it was really amazing and elaborate, and I don't even think we finished seeing through that pass of the middle act and realizing that it's way too elaborate, and maybe we're cutting our story short in the end by kind of putting this big colorful race on in the middle that it doesn't give you much place to go when you've had the most elaborate race you can imagine in the middle act. But we still needed something to drive McQueen's desire while he's in the town, to give him something to do and kind of put a timer on the whole thing. So that's where Bessie came from. And Bessie's a very doable, something that a car can do that's work that you don't have to have hands for. You kind of get it, and it's disgusting. It's, putting him next to tar and it's degrading because he has to pull this thing like a pack animal. So we found that this machine Bessie was taking care of a lot of those issues that we needed to address.
For a while, we'd played around with the idea of taking McQueen's engine out of his body and putting it into a steamroller, which would somehow make him the steamroller. I guess the idea being that, I don't know, there's some whole... Wherever your engine is, that's where you are, I guess was the concept. Yeah, and so it was a really funny, I really liked the sequence that Rob Gibbs did of him as this steamroller. It was really funny to see him, the fastest car in the world, only having the ability to go 5 miles an hour. And, we kind of quickly abandoned the idea because it kind of made the town look crazy to be doing this to someone. But we came back to it and thought, no, but the idea of putting him in that situation is good. We just need to figure out, how do we do it
for real?
How do we do it for real? And so that's where Bessie came from.
This is, I think, one of the funnest sets in terms of reimagining something that exists in terms of a car universe, and that was through the motels that existed in the Southwest, remaking them as caution cones instead.
And with flows and all this, the time to get people off the road, get the tourists to visit your spot, you'd have these kind of wild, like the TP and other attractions. And with flows, it's a big V8, and so there's this kind of comical quality to all these buildings to get visitors and patrons. But
yeah, there's a mixture of the sort of the goofy, overwrought architecture and design versus even just some of the classical, sort of the Art Deco stylings of Ramon's shop.
In this sequence, the minivan husband and minivan wife, which is what we called them, are actually the same car, and we just pushed them with some controls and then slapped a different paint color on them and slapped the roof rack on the husband and did a bunch of shading things to him to actually make them feel different. And this is an example like JC was talking about where the headlights are actually fake. They're not real headlights. They're these fake two-dimensional headlights that are painted on. But what that gave us the ability to do was to have different headlights for the husband and the wife so that they actually looked, they had this different look about them. So they looked like different car models.
I love what Sean Krause is doing here, where McQueen is like trying to grab with his wheels, and suddenly they're like hands. I mean, he feels like he's like trying to claw his way out.
It really feels like he's stuck to Bessie, too.
He's stuck, and it's one of those things where, as an audience member, watching the film, you'll project reference, you'll project experiences and things you've seen in life and around you, and you'll make that connection to the screen.
I don't know where these flashbacks came from. I can't remember initially where it came from, but it just worked as a nice way to kind of see into McQueen's head, see where he was at that moment, and see just how egomaniac and deluded he was.
And they're so quick. There's room for them. Sometimes in these stories, the dream sequences are the first things to go, but in this case, they're so quick cutting. You kind of get the idea really fast, and it's concentrated fun to see what these guys are thinking about. There was a fun one for a while where he's kind of imagining the piston cup like an angel waving, floating ahead of him, and he's kind of flying up off the racetrack up towards her and stuff. So there were a few different weird dreams we went through.
There was one where the piston cup actually had a mouth and was speaking to him.
Come to me.
And he was flying with the piston cup on $1 million bill. Yeah. It's very bizarre.
I'm done. Look, I'm finished. Just say thank you and I'll be on my way. That's all you got to say.
A quick note on the shot where Mater gets on the new road, the paved road. John saw it in animation, and at the time when they showed it to him, they didn't have motion blur on, and he loved it so much so that we decided in the final shot, we actually rendered Mater in 2 passes. His tires and wheels had motion blur, but his body did not have, and it kind of pushed that effect of the roughness of the road.
Is a great example for the system built to simulate the way cars move over a bumpy surface, because it allowed the animators to not worry about the follow through that you have to do when you're animating a car going over bumps. The car sort of automatically reacted like a springed vehicle in a way that could be controlled but didn't require too much care and feeding per shot. So this system called Kingpin that allowed us to have the characters do all kinds of cool things when they went over different lumpy surfaces. And you got a lot seemingly for free when you animated a car going over these surfaces.
The metaphor of car forms in the world was pretty well filtered down throughout all sorts of design. There's the treads in the sky. They're high altitude clouds. You can see all the car forms out in the landscape.
Hood ornaments.
Yeah, that's Willys Butte. It's actually based roughly on a hood ornament from like a 39 Willys. Slightly modified. We still have cactus, but I think even the cactus, some of them, you'll see there's little tiny car silhouettes in the close-ups of the cactus. They're kind of like the little buds.
My friend Guido, he dreamed to give a real race car. A pit stop.
Pit stop?
Do you guys remember we always thought that, okay, we have reflections, but at least we don't have hair on the show.
Yeah, we at least thought that.
And Guido shows up with the biggest afro.
I used to joke during production that, the worst thing that could possibly have happened to me was if I walked in the morning and John was like, all right, it's not about cars anymore, it's about horses. Because then we would have muscles and fur and...
That's a great combination of the shading work by David Meunier and the dressing by Tom Miller. That was a good integration of a lot of real pebbles on that ground to mix in with the ground shader, which was shaded to look like dirt and rocks so that it could catch highlights and it could shadow as well.
Yeah, this scene of Doc challenging McQueen did come out of the earlier idea of having a race in Radiator Springs, because McQueen had never driven on dirt before, and the Radiator Springs race had a big section of it that was on dirt. So actually, I think in the early phases, it was when McQueen was testing out the Radiator Springs Grand Prix track that he reached the dirt part and spun out. That's when Doc said, you know, you need to learn to race on dirt. And it was a humbling experience for McQueen. Well, when we lost the race, we still loved that lesson, and we still loved the idea of Doc teaching him. So actually, I believe it was Dan Fogelman that came up with the idea of do it as a challenge, you know, do it as a tortoise and hare thing where Doc can show him up and you know, make him look kind of stupid. And I think what works nice about that is it shows that even though McQueen is this arrogant guy, he still cares a lot about racing. He still wants to be good at it. You know, he's a driven guy and cares about the thing that he does well. So Doc seeing McQueen practicing all the next morning shows a little bit of that to Doc. Okay, this guy isn't a complete jerk. He cares about something. He cares about doing what he does well. And I think that's kind of a turning point for Doc to say, okay, maybe I can help this guy.
Every piece of road McQueen is knocking up here, Mike Wu animated by hand.
Mike Wu.
A couple of times over.
Actually, we should call a fix on it right now so that he can just spruce it up a
animate
little
it.
maybe
He
it
can
can be a little
animate it
sweeter
again.
for the DVD.
I think it was one of his. It wasn't his first. It was one of his first shots on the film. It was crazy.
Yeah. It's like Sisyphus who has to roll a rock uphill for eternity.
The way the story department works is we kind of have a team of people working. Maybe I believe it was like 7 or 8.
Yeah, you start a little smaller and then you grow to maybe a dozen in the middle, and then shrink as the movie's finishing up.
And we have a head of story. In this case, it was Joe Rampt, who's also the co-director of the film, who just kind of works with us as sort of a liaison between the director and us to hand us out sequences. You know, we each get a certain sequence of the movie, and the head of story just kind of watches all that, makes sure it's all working, gives us help and direction as far as the overall continuity of the story, making sure we're not just making our own little tiny movie out of our each individual sequences, you know, as well, again, as him just working with the director and making sure that we're all giving him what the director wants.
And he's also casting the sequences, kind of looking at what people's skills are and maybe casting them on something that they're more appropriate for, and then maybe trying to help them with their skills by casting them on something they're less, you know, familiar with. So hopefully we're all kind of growing along the way as well.
The new road at some point was, I don't know, maybe 3 inches higher than what it is now.
Oh, right.
And we noticed it in this shot, actually, where Guido is sort of touching the road, and it was obvious that it was too high. So while the sequence was in animation, we actually had to lower that road.
Right. So one of the sort of weird consequences of the fact that the characters knew where the ground was, first time we've ever done that at Pixar, characters knew where the ground was and stuck to the ground. But once in a while, when you were in the middle of animation, you'd notice that the characters were floating, or that they were, you know, or that they seemed to be way too high on their wheels, off of their wheels, and their wheels were on the ground, but they were way too high, or that they were way too low, or that there were wheel intersections with the body. And so it was sort of this guessing game, because you'd be like, oh, well, what happened? Did the animation change, or did the road change, or, you know, and we'd have to track that down quite often.
You should look at the lovely soft reflections of the cars on that new road. Those reflections are so carefully done so that it feels like a brand newly paved road. It's just a hint of reflection.
I remember John always talking about the look of a new road, and luckily, I think a couple of months later, they paved the road in front of Pixar on one of the cross streets, and it was a good place to go and get some references.
Great. Here's a subtle example of just pantomime. You see Doc, he gets an idea about something there, and this is not told in dialogue, so this is a huge opportunity for the animator. He's kind of facetiously trying to get Sheriff out so that he has his ulterior motive now of going down and coaching McQueen. But it's nice, and it's a gift to an animator when something like that isn't, told for them in the dialogue.
This ain't asphalt, son. This is dirt.
Each car has its own tire tread, kind of aspect ratio feel. Mater's tires, of course, all being different, all the tread pattern and wear. but they have kind of a subtlety in their color so that you really believe it. It's not, I mean, if you were to just kind of paint them rubber and not have, like when HUD turned there, you see the dirt on his tread. And McQueen here, of course, has his street tires. He changes right after the race, changes into tires with tread.
Thank you! Or should I say no thank you? Because in opposite world, maybe that really means thank you.
You know, it was a real challenge with McQueen, I think, through the whole process was how to make McQueen cocky but still appealing. Like once Owen Wilson got really comfortable with the character, a lot of Owen came out of the character, and the more that we worked that into the animation, that problem of cocky but still appealing kind of solved itself. Like the truth and the real reason that we selected Owen Wilson is what made him genuine. I'm just fascinated by you have these cocky athletes like Joe Namath, Muhammad Ali. They can be this bigger than life person that is their own biggest fan, but you still love them. You still think you can't take your eyes off them. And that's what we really wanted out of McQueen.
Part of the success of the reflections on the characters is that you can minimize the reflection quite a bit. And when we looked at some automotive photography, we realized that in an interior setup, all they go for is a contrast between bright and dark, and they create that horizon line on the side of the car. In our setup, we basically decided to do the same. It was a bit too much to reflect all the trees, all the buildings, all the vegetation. What we ended up with is a much smaller reflection set, mainly comprised of the sky. You see it in Sheriff in this shot. And the ground, and sometimes we'd reflect the characters in the other characters, and that gave us quite a bit, actually, and made metal feel like metal.
This is a great Dan Mason shot. There's so much choreography going on in here, like the filling up of the air in the tires.
I think this is also an interesting point on this Luigi shot with John, how he would break his own rules of physics if it was funny.
Guido pops up out of nowhere.
Or Luigi would zip faster than he really would be able to. And it's just that great, like, okay, yeah, we have these rules, but, you know, you can break them in really expressive ways.
You buy one tire, I give you 3.
This is an example of a car doing something that actually somehow works, where Ramon has an airbrush on his wheel. Kind of felt pretty convincing.
Actually, that's the only shot, I think, of Ramon and Flo's house. We had the sequence where everyone is going to bed when McQueen is still working on the road late at night, and we see Doc going to sleep and Sally going into the motel. For a while, we had a sequence where we kind of showed everybody going into their respective homes, and I think that was why their house was even built in the first place. But it was kind of cool to see just the little houses where everyone lived. But again, there just wasn't time for it.
There was a little alley behind Luigi's shop that looked like a little Italian, like one of those narrow streets in an Italian village. So it was kind of fun to see them going back to their little place that looks like it's in another country. We explored Sally's character a lot, and Bonnie Hunt was really helpful coming in as a writer and consulting on her own character and bringing a lot of life to her own character that helped us along.
And Bonnie's one of those people who can just improvise so well too. She would have specific lines, but inevitably she would just come up with this great, funny stuff.
Figure that all out on your own, did you?
This idea came out of a gag session with the animators. One of the animators
they think
came
like
up.
that.
Yeah. No. There you go. At one point, I saw a version of this where behind Mater, when they put camera pulls out like that, there was a sign that said slow. I thought it was really
very
funny.
Cryptic, and
I don't know why that's gone, but it always made me laugh.
It's stating the obvious.
Yeah. The idea of McQueen and Mater going tractor tipping came out of a note as well that we got, which was just, why is it fun to be in Radiator Springs? At that point, we hadn't really shown anything that what do these people do? What do they do with their free time? What do they do for fun? It was just I pitched it as a one-off joke that Mater could say, "Hey, let's go tractor tipping." And the great thing is John just kind of said, "Let's make it a whole sequence."
He just jumps ahead, and then you get the chance to see it through, which is what's great about working with John, is that you have a chance to try stuff out, put your neck out there a little bit, and if it flies, it flies, and if it doesn't, you've felt safe enough to propose the idea in the first place. And this is one that stuck.
Actually, Steve did the voices of
I got to do scratch sound effect for these guys and kept waiting for it to be replaced by real animal sound, and would actually ask the editors, "Hey, have they changed out my sound yet into a real tractor sound?" And they never got around to it. At one point, I was so invested in wanting to hear it in the movie that I said, I just want it in the movie, even to the detriment of the movie.
Tractors is so done.
From the character side, this was the very first sequence that the characters were aware of the ground and knew what they were doing. And we did wedge test upon wedge test upon wedge test of figuring out how wide the ruts needed to be in the ground, how high they needed to be, how Mater responded to those, how McQueen responded to those, how Frank responded to those. So this was a big learning experience for us.
In addition, we had the additional problem of making the grass look like it was covering up those bumps and not having the bumps poke through the grass or the grass look like it was the wrong length.
That grass was developed for that sequence so that it could be trampled and it could blow in the wind a little bit. And the TD who worked on it, Brad Weinmiller, we said to him, that's the grass we developed for tractor tipping and we're not going to use it later. And we ended up using it everywhere else. So that was, it's always funny.
And design-wise, it's fun. Just the whole cow tractor. Jay Schuss did great work on that. And Tia with the cow rust patterns on the side. They're just so much fun.
How Jay started out with a cow and showed the metamorphosis of a cow becoming a mechanical tractor object was amazing.
So Frank was a ton of fun. He was this, huge combine. He's unlike any of the other characters. He has a different sort of mouth structure and so on. But he was a lot of fun, and he actually doesn't. All the other characters are bouncing over these ruts, and Frank actually just mows through them. He doesn't respond at all to the ground. He responds to a very, very smooth ground that doesn't have any of those bumps on it at all.
And the ruts, another thing to say about the ruts is that they had to be rotated based on the direction the characters went in. So there's always ruts, regardless of the direction they go in.
They're never going just straight
down. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Right.
Reference for Frank was also pictures of bulls.
Yep.
We needed to make him feel like a bull while still being a machine.
So where's the Eiffel Tower picture in this? So
it's
screen left.
Screen left up. Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And the little mat says welcome, not welcome. It's welcome. And honk for service.
Everything inside the office of the Cozy Cone is cone-shaped.
So here, I believe we had mention of the ghost light, which was something that we learned about on Route 66 through Dean Walker, who told us tales of the ghost light, which is this supposed glowing orb of light that appears.
Some people say it's swamp gas, but others believe it's supernatural in nature.
Which is what Michael would tell us. And we never got a chance to go look for the ghost light, although Dean did offer. Unfortunately, we had to go. I don't really know what it would have been.
We're going to go back and see that someday.
Yes, you do that.
But Joe, as head of story, didn't get a chance to draw as much as the rest of us, but did get to draw a little bit. And this was one of the sequences that he worked on. We're trying to figure out this kind of warm moment between McQueen and Mater. And Joe pretty much nailed it right off the bat. And this moment didn't really change that much from the first time he boarded it up through the production.
One of the things, too, that we noticed when we went on the road was not only were people's actual motels and attractions sort of interesting and unique, but in a lot of cases, the people themselves did interesting and unique things as an attraction. And one of the people we met, again, Dean Walker, had the amazing ability to turn his feet backwards. I'm not really sure how he did it, and it looked horribly painful, but it was great. He had this great talent, and so
it's a sight worth seeing.
Yeah, and so one of the things we wanted to do with Mater was just kind of give him that
some backwards reference,
not even necessarily backward, but just some sort of thing that he was the world's best. I mean, I'm the guy that can do this slightly bizarre talent, and so that's where the backwards driving came from.
And we actually have a little taste of that in the final race where McQueen does race backwards, but there was a whole version of the final race where McQueen gets damaged and his transmission doesn't work right, and he actually has to do a big chunk of the last race backwards, having learned from Mater. One of the things we explored in that final race.
And notice McQueen, he's starting to get more dust on his body. He is slowly again becoming one of the people in the town, the characters in the town.
I mean, I've always wanted to ride in one of them fancy helicopters.
We like Mater wagging his tail probably came out of some gag session. We were always trying to figure out what Mater could do. Like having a tow hook is really handy for a character with no arms or legs because we could do things with that, and having him use his tow hook to kind of wag like a happy dog was probably something that Joe had come up with.
And Joe, I believe, came up with that helicopter thing too, throwing his tow hook around like a helicopter.
That was the last story change in the movie, seeing McQueen start to drive backwards.
Mm-hmm.
He was originally going to go headfirst into the parking lot, but it became apparent that he needed to have learned how to drive backwards later in the movie. So this was a good opportunity for him to try.
Yeah.
This is an example of some stuff that I believe Bonnie Hunt worked on, just to kind of get McQueen and Sally's relationship working better, which was something that we had struggled with for a while. And I really thought that this little added scene that she came up with at the end really made a big difference for me.
Yeah, it's not showy at all. It's just a very sweet little scene. It was fun to see it, see it in script pages, and then fun to kind of see it through in the story. It's kind of a little recognizable moment between characters.
And a moment for McQueen to finally be aware that maybe he's coming off as arrogant, or, being aware of somebody else's feelings for a change.
What did you just say?
When this comes up, when the brake lights and the reverse lights, and you hear it to change gears, like all that stuff that wasn't in when we had it, because at this point, you're buying the fact that they're cars and you're into the story, and you've kind of forgotten that they're cars because you're thinking of them as characters and as humans. And then you get that great little car reference. It totally brings you back to the fact that, oh, that's right, they're cars.
The trees were modeled in such a way where we would see them in the distance mostly, and so there's no twigs that connect the leaves to the branches, and in that one shot it became really apparent, so we had to do some tweaks there to
Here's everyone's favorite.
This is my favorite sequence.
Yeah. Frank as a bad guy, catching them in the nightmare is wonderful.
The famous lick.
The lick, yeah. Mm-hmm. And that little alarm clock.
I gotta get out of here.
Here's a doctor's office. Some beautiful matte painting there by Paul Topolo. There's a little working oscilloscope in there to get your eyes on.
And the x-ray?
Yeah, there's a car x-ray.
It's a great blend of a doctor's office, all that kind of porcelain, very clean, and then all the, I think it was early 20s and 30s repair shops that were called.
Yeah, they were a lot of tile and chrome.
In the back room garage here, one of the main things that we did was to try to make this feel like this room had been abandoned. I mean, Doc went back in there, but it had not been cleaned up. It was a place where things collected.
40 years of accumulation.
40 years, exactly. And so there's dust in the air and dust on all the surfaces. We actually did a special dust pass on the trophy that you can see. It catches light in a nice way. And then in all the shots in the sequence, there are little motes of dust in the air that drift down. Can't always see them, but they're there.
Every time we see that shot, John would comment how beautiful the dust was. And we've seen it maybe 20 times with John.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was also, another one of John's, he had a specific picture reference for that set and said, you have to make it look exactly like that with the amount of clutter in the garage.
It was a photograph of somebody's office with just stuff piled all over the place. It was crazy amount of stuff.
I think sometimes it's like sometimes there's a fast, like, let's do this quickly and simple. And you learn even the simplest piece of pavement there is not even and straight. It has a natural unevenness and form to it that's hard for a computer just to knock out.
You know, Doctor's a famous race car?
One of the questions we had is, how do they get gas? And in this sequence, now that we're pointing it out to you, you will notice that we just kind of naturally stage it in a way that McQueen's ready to, get gas. And
early on, we were working with Gary Schultz, and we were just trying to figure out how to get a gas, a gas station to work.
You just put enough mechanical, like all the doors in the picture, they're kind of on a mechanical hinge or something. We just try to not make it, too noticeable. If the car approached it, the doors would kind of open up.
The use of levers and buttons, that was one of the questions of our design thinking throughout the film, was how do they do stuff? And the default solution was they have a button, they have a lever, to open a door or shut a door, to lower the gas pump, to do a lot of things. There's just a little convenient button. They seem to fit in pretty well. We try to downplay it, but how do they do things? Only Guido is really equipped with something like a functional set of arms.
Right, the forklifts would rule the real world if this was
evolution of
they're slaves in this world.
The shadow of the tree in this shot is very symbolic. It's McQueen going into the dark side, or being tempted by the darker side, but actually making a wise decision. And the tree is not even...
not even there. There's no tree there.
It's not existent. It's a shadow cookie. It's just a picture of tree shadows that we put on the ground.
We're going to enter a sequence where I think everyone's just in awe over. Yeah, the Drive with Sally sequence.
This is one of those sequences happened at the end of production. Everybody's running on all cylinders, so to speak, and really, knows exactly what they're doing. Yeah. The lighters know what they're doing. Yes. The sets guys know what they're doing, and I'm flabbergasted by this sequence.
That sequence is amazing. Yeah, I think you hit it. We do it last because it seems like, there's a lot to do, but everyone knows what they have to do and how to do it. And
this sequence is really boiling down the essence of a really fun drive on a beautiful day. And I think it's something that all of us have probably done at least once. And we really wanted to get a whole transition from one vegetation scheme down by Radiator Springs up through this low pine forest.
Yeah.
And up through the cliff country going up to the top of the mountain. So there's deciduous trees, there's conifer trees. The road varies, the topography changes. We go through cars like that one, and then we see, in a moment, we see the beautiful waterfall, which is sort of ties it all together as a piece of just, there just because it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. There's really no other reason.
Where's that bridge from?
That's kind of the Big Sur Bridge. And also the Arroyo Parkway over the Arroyo in
Pasadena?
Yeah.
Yep.
Of course, they don't have a waterfall in Pasadena.
This, the following shot shows us driving up a twisty road, which is modeled after the old Priest Grade in on the way up to Yosemite, a beautiful twisty road that's great fun to drive on and has big sweeping curves up the side of a cliff.
The wheel well is a fun idea of just kind of taking the idea of the car forms in nature and how car promoters would look at those forms and find ways of making a motel in a place where it looked like one should go for a wheel.
This place?
This was a scene that was initially very static and had the characters kind of parked out in front of the wheel well, checking it out. And as we went through a couple of versions of the reels, we found that maybe it would be more fun to move with the characters, kind of roam through this location. And
it's really pretty
and some of that might have come out of John kind of seeing this model develop and realizing that it has potential that's worth exploring. And also it's nice to keep the characters moving, especially if they're cars.
Clues to the puzzle.
Okay. Well, that was...
If you study the sequence, you'll see they actually drive through that little space twice to achieve all the dialogue they need to do it. You can get away with murder in film.
I mean, really?
So the little bugs appeared early on the fluorescent light, and it's fun because you kind of get a little glimpse of the fact that they're VW Beetles. And
there's one upside down, right?
There's one dead in the foreground here.
At one point, there was talk of having one that was up on blocks.
Recharge the old batteries, but...
I have to say about this section of the film, one of the things that I love about this movie and working on a John picture is that John isn't scared to kind of slow down a little bit and let you really feel something more than just nervously throwing jokes at you the entire movie and tiring you out. You know, it like a nervous comedian or something. You get to really feel all the other emotions in the palette.
This is a combination of a lot of great matte painting by Randy Barrett and a layered series of models also occurring at the same time to give us sort of this great sense of depth and scale. And there's an example of kind of metaphorically the old interstate would cut through the world like that.
Yeah. 40 years ago, that interstate down there didn't exist.
For a while, this scene was actually Doc taking McQueen up and telling him the story of the town. And I think it went back and forth between Doc and Sally a few times. I'm not really sure why. I look back at it now and I think, well, it has to be Sally. But
yeah, and it feels like Sally's kind of the voice of the person that, from outside that's kind of realizing the potential of the town. And we had a version of it where Doc is telling him the story and then has a heart attack and rolls backward down the hill.
Yeah, that was...
And then he has to be restarted by Sarge.
See, that's why it takes 4 years.
The flashback was a lot simpler in boards. It got to be explored a bit more as it went through the process.
What happened was we heard Randy Newman's song for the first time. And up until then, the scene was more just in general about the town fading. But it was really in listening to the words that he'd written that we kind of at the last minute reboarded the whole scene and realized it has to feature the main characters. It has to be the town dying from their point of view. They're the characters you care about.
This is a very specific color scheme that Bill Cohen, the production designer, and John came up with. The idea is to go back in time with color. And they looked at photographs, and Bill did some research and found online some very specific technical data, how film reacted 50 years ago or so. So we came up with this this setup for this sequence. We also added a bit of noise to get that filmic effect. CG computer graphics tends to look a bit too sharp, but for this specific sequence, it was nice to soften it a bit.
One of the things that I think is cool about this project and fun to work on is the fact that there's some real version of this world that you could find out about. I mean, I knew about road trips and travel across the country when I was a kid, but I never really understood the idea of Route 66 and how so many of these towns dried up when the interstate was put in. So it was really interesting to learn that on this project and know that that's kind of out there if people want to find out more about this world.
But it's our town. Love it anyway.
I think this whole sequence really took off when we first heard James Taylor singing it. because there's just a quality to his voice and to his singing that really resonated.
It matched the mood and the tone of the story.
Coming right off the shots of the town's history and the town dying, and then going right into Doc's tragic past, it just seemed like the movie hit kind of a double beat of sadness.
So to lighten it up, Joe and the story guys reincorporated the tractors from Tractor Tipping and came up with all of this great material.
And so we just wanted to inject some fun right in the middle. So the tractors were always good for that.
In the reels, you get a pretty good sense of what the pacing is, and you kind of start feeling, the lagging if you've got too much of the same kind of beats following one another. So it gives you a good handle on whether you need to pump up an area or give some more energy to a certain area in the middle of, a bunch of more serious beats.
Don't eat the radio! Here, take the snow tires.
It actually gave McQueen an excuse to go chasing after one to go and discover HUD was there.
Hey guys, there's one going this way. I got it.
The sequence was a pretty big challenge, lighting the smoke. The smoke had to be uniform throughout the sequence, but we had 4 or 5 lighters working on it, and it started to vary from shot to shot. We ended up consolidating the look by getting one person to work on the whole sequence. It was fairly tricky setup.
So on the scene with Doc where he's going to show his skill, he doesn't know McQueen's watching, and it was initially boarded really roughly, knowing that we were going to try to make it into an After Effects scene. After Effects are kind of like storyboards that are produced more, so they kind of resemble simple animation. And so I created a bunch of different elements of Doc in different angles and worked with Patrick Seymour, who is our After Effects artist. And we had researched a bunch of dirt racing, Baja racing and stuff, and looking at the kind of angles they use when they're covering that stuff.
For all you car enthusiasts out there, this is the real deal, the Hudson Hornet. All those details.
And this whole sequence was John's baby.
Oh, yeah.
I just remember him going, you remember him showing us like that rally.
The road rally footage,
yeah.
The European road rally footage of cars jumping, doing the dirt racing. We looked at a lot of that stuff, especially this shot right here.
Yeah, Victor Navone. Great sense of weight in slow motion, which was really hard.
Victor was really good. We asked him to go back to that shot because there was something that we weren't satisfied with, and Victor's like, I'm not satisfied with it either. Thanks for letting me fix it. He went back and touched it and made it even that much better and just plussed it. It's beautiful.
Again, Cameron Miyazaki, it's hard. It's animated this shot, and it's great, that sense of jiggle. You know that it would feel right sped up. It looks so good in slow motion.
Slow motion is so hard to get across in animation.
Again, it's not technically accurate. You have to find something that feels right in slow motion. It's not just a simple matter of animating it in straight time. And
one of the things I liked about this shot, John was mentioning that in the staging of it, that HUD pulls all the way up to the wall, like a car really does in a garage. So it really feels car-like for him to pull all the way up, against the wall there.
I really, really like this scene. It'd be easy to think, well, he's being kind of quiet and low key. So we'll just pull everything in, and you could easily end up with something that's just too slow or gooey or something. But there's a real sense of sharpness and intensity, even though he's not moving very much. You can see it in his eye darts when he's on his way to hitting on the light, and you can see it just in the use of the jaw kind of snapping open and shut. So even though things are really contained, there's real life in there.
I keep that to remind me never to go back.
Hud's Grill was one of the interesting challenges we had for both articulation and for animation. It was very, very important to John that it still felt like chrome, that it never feel too noodly, is sort of the word that he used for it. And so there was this sort of vocabulary that they developed for how to move the minimal amount possible and still make it look like he was talking and make it look like he was expressing emotion. So in this sequence especially, remember Jim Murphy took an awful lot of care with the animator that was working on it to make sure that there was just the bare minimum amount of motion to get across the point and to get across the lip sync.
There's a mentorship kind of thing going on between these two, and this was a tough thing to really sell, I think, to the audience. And I think, Doug, you came up with the suggestion to make McQueen kind of come back at Hud. Hud's angry at him, but then McQueen kind of throws it back at him.
Mater's shack, Mater's junkyard, throughout the movie was meant to be seen mostly in the distance or at night, and then suddenly we have this super close-up shot at the end of the movie where we had to upgrade the model so that it could hold up at this very close-up, do additional paint and additional shading.
We used to have a sequence which was McQueen actually finishing the road, and as he's struggling to finish the road, Bessie starts to break apart. And Mater comes up and tries to help him by kind of towing Bessie along, and the sheriff stops him and says, "You can't do that. You know, you need more people to help." And the whole town comes together to help McQueen finish the road. And it was kind of McQueen finally asking for help from someone for the first time in his life. And, it was fun, but it just seemed a little unnecessary and as well as just for time, trying to keep the story moving along. We found it worked better just to have him done with it and have him gone, so that we can see the town's reaction to him leaving.
Oh, he's just sad 'cause you left town and
So Jay Boost animates this shot of Mater waiting for McQueen. Kept showing it, and John kept going, add more time, add more time, add more time. Okay, 2 frames less. There you go.
Yeah, it's almost.
I still think you could have added more time. I think the longer it goes, it's just got to be uncomfortably long.
Well, it was the same thing, too, with that Michael Makarovich shot we were just talking about, where it's not enough that Mater just wakes up in an entertaining way. Well, what can we do when he's sleeping? And add the drool. Well, he's a car, so it's oil. And, okay, it's like, once he gets a hold of an idea, you got to milk it.
There was always the idea that somehow McQueen would patronize these people, be a customer for them. And we went through a lot of different versions of how that worked. And ended up with in drawings, a pretty lame version of what McQueen looks like at the end of the day, patronized. Like we had little flags on his windows and stuff.
Yeah,
like
there was
that.
Flags and stickers. And
we always knew he would buy tires, and that's an easy get, that he's going to buy tires, and he's going to buy the tires that Luigi wants to sell him, which are the white walls. Luigi's always pushing the white wall. But it was always kind of a mystery that we're hammering away at. Well, like, what are the other things that he does in the town?
One of the interesting things with Guido was trying to figure out how the heck was he gonna be able to get enough motion so that he could hold something, because it was sort of a repeating theme, and how he could get enough motion to gesture with his forklift. So he's sort of loosely based on Italian mini cars, or German mini cars from the 50s. He just sort of has these 2 independent prongs that are sort of bolted onto his fenders, and that way he can do a lot with them.
And like in a car movie, one of the cars rebelling against the oil companies.
Okay. Yeah,
that makes me happy.
You noticed in the snow globe of the curio shop that there's a little Nicky from our short film Knick Knack in there. For the most part, this is the only sequence where we actually go inside the shops of Radiator Springs. So we see in detail inside this shop, inside several others. And we built them all out to tell the little stories that were happening here, but didn't have to work for the rest of the film.
This is McQueen's, I think, 9th phase, and this was one of the places where we really showed off. We worked really hard in shading in characters to make sure we could do metal flake compellingly, and it's a pretty hard thing to do in computer graphics to make it sort of shimmer in the way that it wants to, and not just get all blurry at distances. So this is one of the places where John really liked what we had done, and so he designed this thing to sort of show off a lot of the metal flake.
So the idea of turning the neon again was one idea that's been there since the beginning, since before I got here. John just loved the idea that, during the day, these places, a lot of them are kind of run down and the paint is peeling. But at night, no matter at what state, if their neon works at night, they're just beautiful.
Right. If you turn the light on to that, you don't see the crackling paint stuff, which is actually all in the models, by the way. Peeling paint and stuff.
The cycle of the V8 is an accurate cycle of a car's engine V8 when the neon spark plugs are flickering.
I think it's based on a Chevy, isn't it?
Yeah, we had the schematics for it. Yeah.
Yeah, John used to work in a Chevy parts department.
Thank you.
One of the big sort of motivations for this was John liked to point out American graffiti, and there's a sequence at night where things are sort of blown out in the same kind of way, and there's very, very glossy, very reflective surfaces with neon, and that was one of the big motivations I know here.
And if you notice in that previous shot where the reflection is swimming on Flo's back, this was carefully set up. We moved the signs around just to get that perfect reflection, where reflection would highlight the body details. That was a really neat tool that we used in reflection quite a bit. It really showed some nice modeling that the car came with, and if it was carefully positioned, you just got a beautiful sense of three-dimensional modeling on the characters.
I remember trying to draw this with colored pencils, and it just isn't the same.
No, somehow it's not. Yeah, I think all the times we tried to... Well, again, Patrick Seymour did amazing After Effects. With our terrible colored pencil drawings, he was able to make them flicker on and give them a glow. And, it's something that needed to be sold. The idea needed to be sold even in the reels, even in these rough sketches. We had to show how beautiful this was eventually going to be.
Oh, Stanley. I wish you could see this.
Was Stanley ever a living character? I think we used to show Stanley in the flashback. It's always a little unclear as to whether Stanley is a statue or actually Stanley encased in some sort of metal entombment of some kind.
Because why not? Why wouldn't they just park him there?
This was a scene that we used the reference from Close Encounter. With the helicopter scene, and it's very, very useful.
We have found McQueen! Wait, excuse me.
In the next shot, this shot with all the flashes, John just wanted us to push the flashes to fairly high intensity, just to show, how the moment is and how overwhelming the moment is for McQueen. So it definitely hurts the eyes.
Right. The story point here, of course, is that this world that he used to love is actually this garish, horrible thing that he doesn't like anymore.
Mac?
This was actually a bit of a trick to figure out how to get Mac to be able to turn around in this intersection, which is much, much smaller than it than really Mac needs to, than 18 really needs to turn around with a 45-foot trailer or whatever he is. So this was a bit of a trick to get that to happen, and then at the same time we were working with the crowd simulator to make sure that all the crowds would get out of the way and then get back in, sort of pull back out and then pull back in without all getting jammed up and getting caught in their own traffic.
How you doing, buddy?
It's funny. We did a lot of reference of climbing inside car trailers and the haulers to see the inside of those. They don't look like that on. Well, it was. Early on too, there was Carl and Monty, right? There was two cars, and they're in there almost like bunk beds, and most trailers have two cars on top because you wouldn't fit them in between the wheels of the trailer, so they're elevated, and so we try to keep the best of both worlds. We try to make it very believable in terms of even those stickers on the side of these trailers. We try to be really true to that, but their world's different. The inside of these haulers, they would have a different arrangement, and again, all those switches and buttons to make things work.
This is the first time in the movie where you actually see tears. I think it starts out with Sally and then McQueen, and we again had to do a bit of research. We couldn't find much research about crying cars, so we had to use humans, but it ended up looking pretty good.
We built a new system to allow ourselves to well up tears in the bottom of eyes. And the key in getting a good read on them was adjusting how much they refract, the light going through them.
There's the refraction and the swimming quality of the highlights that just ever so slightly moves around. And this shot was very important for John. This is the last time McQueen saw the characters, and with all the reporters, he wanted to make sure that we read the characters. So we turned those stun guns on the characters in the background so you could see them. And if you notice, the hills in that very specific shot are actually readable. In all the previous shots, they were going pretty dark. And again, this is John's point of McQueen's last memory of the town, from the characters to the buildings to the hills in the background.
This was added late in the game where Sally discovers that Doc made the call to McQueen's crew so that he would get picked up. And I really liked when that came out because it made him such a creep, or made him do such a creepy thing that he had to be regretful for. I thought that was a neat touch.
I didn't get to say goodbye to.
And what you were saying earlier about Sally always keeping her lights on, Sally was always kind of the hope of the town. She believed in that eventually things would work out. So this moment of her kind of turning off her lights, really, the idea was to really just bring home that she had kind of lost hope.
Jamie Baker worked on this part where all the cars go back and turn their lights off, and it stayed in the reels forever because it totally sold the point. You would see each business and some that he made up because we didn't know what they were, but the lights all shutting down and leaving Doc in the middle.
The sequence of shots is where you are introduced to the Los Angeles Speedway, and it's a mammoth speedway. You want to get that read straight off that this is the biggest event around. So when you fly in, you see everything everywhere. You're up in an airplane, you're up in a blimp, you're seeing, this huge urban basin with this enormous racetrack.
These shots were really a big challenge for the crowds team, because there's all of these cars that are sort of flowing in and sort of independently trying to figure out how to get into the stadium and so on. And this is a sort of, real cars don't do this very well either. And so making this look, realistic enough and still look like the cars are making some headway was a little bit tricky.
Early on in the movie, John had all the animators go up to a racetrack in Sonoma and take hot laps, take laps around in a souped up car at like 100 miles an hour faster. And you don't realize
skids.
On skids. A couple guys spun out.
Yeah.
It started raining at the end.
So they're actually professional drivers that drove us around.
Yeah, it wasn't the animators.
Yeah, we were.
This is professional drivers.
Should not be tried at home.
Yeah.
But the reason was that John really wanted us to feel what it felt like to go at those speeds, to take turns like that, to get loose in the back and just to almost spin out and, just to have that sense of power and drama so that when we're animating these scenes that we really understood it from having done it.
I think it was the exact opposite of when we took my Jetta out to the parking lot. And you guys asked me to go really fast. And, it was completely underwhelming footage. Scott's driving was boring, and we definitely learned something different from both those experiences.
I think we have about 120 or 150,000 cars in this sequence.
How long's this track?
This is actually, it was going to be a larger track, but ending the big finale with the big track with 3 cars on it. And so if we had a 2.5 mile track, it would feel kind of lonely out there. So, gosh, I think it's bigger than the first. It's 1.5 miles, I think.
It's a bigger track. It's more like some of the large tracks that are in the Texas and Las Vegas. There's some very large tracks, and we wanted to feel like that scale.
Oh, hold on. Here comes the little kid.
I haven't seen that yet.
There you go.
Well,
There's the
we
one
don't know that's a kid
car. Yeah, it is. Look, got a little toy. Sorry, go ahead.
And that toy jet that he has is actually a real jet. We just scaled one down.
That was the shot of our only child car in the movie.
Again, is there a car stork in this?
You just saw it.
Oh, what?
Good chica. Hey, where you been, McQueen? I've been kind of.
If you notice, the reflection of the sea here is actually incorrect. It should be a backward sea. But,
It should.
But it was intentionally done that way so that people get the point that this is the new Kachiga effect that Chick is proud of.
Those little bits of stuff in the front of the frame in that shot are called marbles. They're little bits of rubber that have worn off the tires of race cars.
I recently went to the Lucas Ranch where they were doing the sound editing, and I think they spent an hour on those marbles, finessing them to get the perfect sound. It was amazing how much work they did.
I remember we did the type on the wall at one point, and it was too small. They were going so fast. These guys are around 200 miles an hour. You had to kind of get that Daytona big letters, not quite letter space, but extended type, so you can really zip by it and still read it.
We have a mix here of what we called in our world fake grass and real grass. Cheaper in the sense of it doesn't take as much time to render when you see it from far away. But then when we have these close-up shots where McQueen actually is in the grass, we have something that has more depth to it.
The expensive grass can be simulated as well.
Yeah.
To part or to crush when driven on.
The mow lines on the grass too were something that was.
That's right.
Thought
that's a great
of.
thing.
That was the one speedway where John wanted mow lines in the grass, like a baseball field.
I really didn't have a choice.
It's interesting how McQueen's animation has evolved as well in his racing, where in the beginning he was a lot more cocky and arrogant and hot-dogging. And in here he starts off pretty aloof and, detached into becoming very focused and driven on what he's doing.
Hot snot, we are back in business.
So it kind of shows how he's evolved emotionally in the physicality of his athleticism.
I remember we kind of had him driving the same way the whole time, and we did a continuity pass where we realized we had to kind of hot dog it up with him and make it more interesting as he started to get his moxie back.
So the paint job of the fabulous Hudson Hornet, I think, is pretty much what the actual Hudson Hornet's paint job looked like, right? I mean, it was referenced pretty heavily.
In that previous shot where we saw the TV engineer switching video inputs, there are something like 36, I don't know how many different channels of video information that they're working from, and we had real video for all of them.
In over 50 years.
Hey, Doc! Come look at this fellow on the radio. He looks just like you.
We used to have a gag where, Lizzie would drag out that TV, but face the other way and say, "Oh, look, I've got a radio. We can finally listen to the race." And then Red slowly turned the TV around to reveal that it was a TV and not a radio. Get it?
Because she's crazy.
Yeah, I'll imagine that. I wonder why that's not in there.
Round things are called tires, and they go under the car. No, you will have your chance, Guido. You will have your chance.
That is one of my favorite shots of Luigi. It's so overly dramatic, and that's what makes it funny.
There was a lot of reference that went into kind of looking at the way these races are covered on TV so that we could kind of try to emulate the camera angles when we were thinking through these things early on.
Kid. What?
I mean, it was always the thing where we want to make sure anybody who really cares and loves about cars and design would recognize that we're doing all the details. We love it too. And so when he turns around like that, you see those flaps pop up.
With 10 to go. Look at that boy go out there.
No, you don't.
So here's, a moment where we used to have Chick actually using some little blade that came out of his tires to pop McQueen's tires. And it just, again, got out of the realm of any kind of believability and became too maniacal and villainous and just too far.
Yeah, it felt like he could be villainous enough if he was just kind of an overambitious, showboater.
Hey, Tiny, you gonna clean his windshield?
You will notice on the wall of the track, there's always that reflection of the cars. We call it a caustic effect, and we saw that in many of the race references we had.
And this was another one of those things that was really difficult to stage, the idea of having to beat the pace car out and how it really works versus how to show it in a clear way. It's a real testament to layout to have to figure all this stuff out and show it in a way that makes sense to even people like Steve and I who have no idea how racing works after 4 years of working on a movie about racing.
This is it. We're heading into the final lap.
Remember, we push these banks a little bit more, so they're a little cartoony, but in the sense that you don't want to just replicate life. We pushed it a little bit, but you got to watch where the camera sits there, remember, because if you push them too much, you can't get a crowd behind it, which actually is quite good in some of them when you get that blue sky.
Yeah, this is another bit of choreography of Chick attacking McQueen that really needed to be worked out in dailies.
Paul Newman suggested of the idea of there's no way that McQueen could beat those cars across if he was on the dirt and they were driving straight. And he said, if the other two guys got knocked and loosened up a bit, then I could buy it. So it was great to always feel like there were people we had to please. It's not good enough. You can't just cheat it. You have to, and it's great when those people are Paul Newman.
Lightning McQueen is going to win the Piston Cup.
Come on, you got it, Stickers.
I'm not coming in behind you again, old man.
The crashed King actually presented a pretty big challenge for us because we didn't know how to crash him, and there was a design question. You didn't want him to look sort of grotesquely beat up, but it needed to be a bad crash. And it also, there was a story point that, of course, it needs to resemble the Doc Hudson crash. So we actually modeled it by hand. We didn't simulate, denting or anything like that. We actually handed it to one of our very talented modelers that built the King in the first place. And he took the King and then bashed him in and dented him in. And then only the high frequency stuff we would do automatically. We'd do that in a shader so that we could get those high frequency crinkles. But by and large, the shape of the King once he's crashed is sort of a hand built custom thing.
This is another one of those things that never changed the entire time I was working on the film was the ending. As far as the idea that McQueen would go back and push the King. However, there was a while where Chick was disqualified and didn't actually win the cup. But I think that we all felt that Chick had to win. I mean, if the message of the film is it's just an empty cup, then give it to the guy who won it in a really...
Yeah, let's see what that looks like.
Yeah.
If the creep wins the prize, and and the message that we're trying to convey is it's not the prize itself, it's the integrity and it's the way you play the game as well. And so we get to see our hero rewarded in his own way.
All these motorhomes in the shot, we got all the way to digital dailies, and John saw this and said, "Oh, great job by Crowd's team." And the Crowd's tech team goes, we didn't do this shot. And Matt Nolte had hand animated. I think it's like 100 plus motorhomes in this shot. And, it was Matt's first show here at Pixar. And he had made sure all the mouth shapes are perfect and everyone's appealing and stuff.
How come the only one celebrating is me, huh? Where are the girls? Bring on the confetti. Easy with the confetti. What's going on?
The podium here is reminiscent of the Hollywood Bowl. We had that as a reference.
One of the biggest challenges, I think, for lighting on this film is that there's so many characters in every shot. And virtually every character requires some special attention. So there was an awful lot of work done to make sure that each character was looking great in each and every shot. And usually we've got, 10 or more characters per shot. So there was an awful lot of work there.
However, the background cars, all the ones in the stands, could be lit by one major light source or one set of lights. And they would work reasonably well. Only when you get up close do you really need to start to tweak those individually.
Very true. Every main character had a specific character rig, and that was comprised of 10 or 15 different lights that did very specific things.
Thanks, Doc. Hey, Light. How about coming over here and talking?
This guy, Humpy Wheeler, that did the voice of Tex here, it is such a real voice. And this guy's not an actor. This guy feels real. It feels authentic. This is how someone really talks. Come on over here and talk to me a minute. You can't write that.
There's a whole lot more to race.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff you want to animate to, is the juice. It feels like it's full of life already.
Thank you, Mr. Tex.
This movie, because it's a metaphor, it's kind of one of the fun things, I think, for fans to see, Daryl Cartrip instead of Daryl Waltrip.
I sure can respect that. Still,
Yeah, it's like the fabric race car. It's like it's woven into the movie itself.
Even down to the name McQueen, who is named after one of our animators who passed away a few years ago, Glenn McQueen. And then the name Lightning. I was driving with John, and I was trying to play music for him that I thought should be in the film. And one of the guys I played was Lightning Hopkins. So he heard the Lightning Hopkins song and said, I like the name Lightning.
Yeah, you're thinking, he's going to like the music.
Yeah.
No, more than the music.
Lightning McQueen, that's good, yeah.
Hi. Lightning McQueen told me this was the best place in the world to get tires. How about setting
I love this because you get to see underneath Luigi. I mean, all our cars, we work so hard. All the details are there. And when he rolls over, it's a funny gag. It's great. But also you get to see his...
The attention.
Yeah, he's got transverse, leaf spring and the front, and his little axles in the back of the engine. Look at that. Oh, that's the way 500 really is.
One thing to say about the sagebrush or the vegetation, the sagebrush is a Uber model, or it's one model. The different types of vegetation that we see in a shot like this, for example, is all made from one model with different controls.
Just passing through?
Actually, I thought
this is the last edition of McQueen where he's got his kind of retro paint job with a retro racing paint job. So he has a more of an older style race number, sticker arrangement. It still has that kind of white cream cove on the side.
I really missed you, Sally.
Well, I create feelings and others they themselves don't understand, and blah, 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 blah.
I think Bonnie might have added that line, her version of his line. I create feelings in others that blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and it's another kind of great version of that improvisation of hers that really added not just humor, but just added a lot to the story and to her character.
My best friend, what are you going to do?
So stickers.
If you look real close, when she drives away, you can see her body shape in the smoke. Watch that. See?
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah. Good job.
Owen Wilson is another person that added a lot of great improvisation, and both of them being writers themselves really, helps out.
And I think even Owen Wilson kind of came up, he was just kind of riffing on the whole lightning thing, and he came up with the ka-chow, and he came up with that ka-chow idea, and they kind of turned that into a character trait of McQueen's, and it's, it really kind of evolved.
Yeah, that's the great thing about John specifically as a director is you are really a contributor with him. It doesn't all come from him. He doesn't expect it to all be kind of fed down from him. He expects actually you to throw your hat in the ring.
Yeah, bring your game.
I've always heard that people say John could actually do anybody's job in any department, but he's smart enough to know to surround himself with really smart and talented people. And whenever they have a good idea, he's a good enough director to go, hey, that idea is better than what I thought it would be. That's really good. Keep that. And he'll just kind of cherry pick all the best stuff and just keep plussing it. instead of saying, this is what I want, I'm the director.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it's really fun to work with him.
The thing with the end credits, it seems like on every film, is they last about 6 to 8 minutes. And 6 to 8 minutes of making a film is not trivial. And so you think you're done making your film, and then the producers come in and say, okay, now it's time to do the end credits. And you think, oh my God, we have to, this is not a little 2-week project.
I was going to say the epilogue's a fun place to kind of, you could just have a lot of fun with the characters and do things that you wanted to do with them that there wasn't room for in the story.
You want to see what happens.
Yeah. Or, I mean, it's funny. It's almost a sad thing sometimes. I mean, you work on these movies for years, and part of you is relieved when they're over, but at the same time, you've figured out all of these problems that we've been talking about that are part of the process, and these shots give you a chance just to have some fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to give up something that you've worked so hard on sometimes.
It is funny. By this point, we're animating this stuff. We know all the rules. We figured all our stuff out. We're the most efficient we could be. And it would have helped us the most to be where we were at the end, at the beginning.
Yeah.
Look at this! It's my hood! It's my hood! I ain't seen this thing in 20 years! Well, it fits perfectly! How do I look?
Aw, dang. I can't remember when this idea came up. I mean, obviously there was always the joke of doing A Bug's Life, just because of VW Bug.
Well, we used to actually have a date scene in the drive-in, so there was a drive-in that was built, and great to be able to see it used somehow, because we took a lot of the neon scene took place here. So it's kind of fun to see it through, and I think you're always you never know what's going to fly in the previews.
That's just great.
Responding to this.
It's just great to have a retrospective of John Ratzenberger's career.
That's right. Get to draw these other characters as cars was fun.
And they got all the original voice talent back to do these. Tom Hanks and Tim Allen and Billy Crystal and John Goodman. Dave Foley, everybody back.
Well, it's quite the comic thespian.
Just get in there. Go, 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 go.
This is great fun to work on because they're just great little in jokes for us and hopefully for the audience as well.
Wait a minute here. They're just using the same actor over and over. What kind of a cut-rate production is this?
This is probably one of the toughest things when watching the movie is this, because Joe is so he's all over this film. He's so integrated.
He's the voice of Red when he cries, and so much of Mater, I think, comes from Joe.
He was also that voice of the Peterbilt truck in there too.
Yeah,
but his sense of how to trust the process and everything over the years is so defined a lot of how we work here at Pixar.
Well, it's funny, because I've been here since Toy Story, as Jim has, and I don't know, this movie reminds me of a Toy Story movie so much. I think it's primarily because so much of Joe is in it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's like pure John and Joe.
Yeah, really.
That whole best friends moment with McQueen and Mater reminds me of John and Joe.
Yeah.
And I think that was the sequence John always talks about, Joe taking a sequence in the film and boarding it out. Even though he's supervisor of the story department, he always picks one sequence, and he always boards out the sequence, and it always ends up unchanging.
Yeah.
The movie kind of changes. It stays in there.
It stays in the movie unchanged the whole time.
And I think it was because that relationship between Mater and McQueen was such a pivotal moment story-wise for that.
I think for this whole film, probably one of the toughest things for us to kind of figure out over time was how to try to find a way for the audience to really forget, in a sense, you're watching a movie about cars, and to try to make a emotional connection to these characters.
Yeah, I think.
But then also make them believable as cars.
As cars.
So that's
It's like a fine line you're walking.
I think it would have been really easy to make something that was cute and, you know, cartoony because it's animated cars. We've seen animated cars before, but to do something that has a presence and a believability, like to walk the line between the car world, but it is also cartoony, but also that they're full of emotions and, you know, problems that are human. And for John to slow the story down enough to tell that story, I think it's pretty brave.
Sometimes when you lose your way, it's really just this way.
Since we've reached the end of the movie, I guess that means we've also reached the end of the commentary. There's a lot more that went into making this film than we could cover here, but hopefully we've given you a little more information that will make your future viewings of Cars that much more enjoyable. For Pixar Animation Studios, I'm Dan Scanlon. Thanks for listening.